Globalization and its consequences. Level B, 2 upper intermediate. Globalization is one of the most powerful forces shaping the modern world. It influences how we work, how we communicate, what we eat, what we buy, and even how we think about ourselves. Although the idea of people, goods, and ideas moving across borders is not new, globalization in the 21st century is faster, deeper, and more complex than ever before. To understand its consequences, we need to look at how globalization developed, what benefits it brings, and what challenges it creates for societies, economies, and cultures around the globe. One of the biggest drivers of globalization has been technology. Innovations in transportation, such as airplanes, container ships, and high-speed trains, made it possible to travel long distances quickly and cheaply. The invention of the internet completely changed communication and created a world where information spreads instantly. Today, a student in Vietnam can study online at a university in Europe. A company in India can provide services to clients in the United States, and a customer in Africa can buy products directly from China with just a few clicks. Technology does not erase distances, but it makes them much less important. Another major force behind globalization is international trade. During the last several decades, many countries opened their markets, reduced tariffs, and allowed foreign companies to operate inside their borders. The creation of organizations such as the World Trade Organization, WTO, and regional trade agreements like the European Union or the North American Free Trade Systems helped integrate national economies. This allowed goods and services to move more freely, which increased global production and expanded opportunities for businesses and workers. However, globalization is not just about economics. It also includes the exchange of ideas, values, lifestyles, and cultural practices. We can see this in the popularity of foreign movies, music, fashion, food, and social media trends. Many people enjoy this cultural diversity and feel that globalization gives them access to a richer and more interesting world. Others worry that local cultures and traditions might weaken under the influence of global media and large multinational corporations. Cultural globalization has both supporters and critics, and its impact depends on how strongly communities value and protect their identities. Economic growth is often described as one of the main benefits of globalization. When countries trade more and cooperate internationally, they usually become more efficient and productive. For example, a country with a strong agricultural sector can export food and import technology, while a country with advanced manufacturing can sell machinery and buy raw materials. This system of specialization allows each country to focus on what it does best. Consumers also benefit from lower prices and a greater variety of products. It is easy to forget that just a few decades ago, many people had limited access to goods that today seem completely common. Despite these advantages, globalization has created serious inequalities. Not all countries benefit equally, and not all people within a country share the profits of international trade. In many developing nations, globalization allowed millions to escape poverty, especially in countries like China, India, or Vietnam, where foreign investment created new jobs. But at the same time, workers in wealthier countries often lost jobs when factories relocated to cheaper markets. This created political tension, economic insecurity, and even anger toward globalization itself. Another important consequence is the growing power of multinational corporations. Large companies that operate in many countries have enormous resources and influence. They can choose where to produce goods, where to pay taxes, and where to hire workers. In some cases, this leads to positive results, such as new jobs and economic development. But it can also put pressure on governments, who compete to attract these corporations by lowering taxes or reducing regulations. This raises questions about fairness, workers' rights, and environmental protection. Environmental consequences of globalization are also significant. International trade increases transportation, which leads to higher emissions and pollution. Many developing countries become industrial centers with factories that may not follow strict environmental standards. At the same time, globalization spreads knowledge about green technologies and supports international cooperation on environmental issues. Problems such as climate change, deforestation, or plastic pollution cannot be solved by one country alone. They require collective action, which globalization can help coordinate. One of the less visible but highly influential aspects of globalization is financial integration. Money flows quickly across borders, and investors can move capital from one country to another in seconds. This allows businesses to expand and encourages innovation. However, it also introduces risk. Financial crises in one region can spread globally, as happened in 2008. Countries become more connected, but also more vulnerable to problems far away from them. Migration is another key part of globalization. People move for many reasons: to find work, escape conflict, study, or seek a better life. Globalization makes migration easier and often necessary because economies rely on foreign labor. Migrants bring skills, culture, and diversity to their new homes, but they may also face discrimination, legal restrictions, and social challenges. As migration increases, societies must learn to balance openness with stability. The spread of information through the internet and global media also has deep consequences. People can now compare their governments, jobs, living standards, and opportunities with those in other countries. This encourages innovation and raises expectations, but it can also lead to dissatisfaction when people feel left behind. Social media platforms connect billions of people, but they also create misinformation, echo chambers, and conflicts that spread quickly. As globalization continues, many countries face a difficult dilemma: how to stay competitive in the global market while protecting local industries, workers, and traditions. This balance is not easy to find. Some countries choose to restrict imports or limit foreign companies. Others focus on education, technology, and innovation to remain strong players in the global economy. The future of globalization will depend on how nations manage these competing pressures. While globalization brings many opportunities, it also exposes countries to risks that were previously less significant. One of the most discussed issues is the loss of economic independence. When a country heavily depends on global supply chains, international markets, or foreign companies, it becomes vulnerable to disruptions. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many countries experienced shortages of basic goods, medical equipment, and electronic components because factories in other parts of the world temporarily shut down. This showed how interconnected and fragile global systems can be. Another challenge relates to labor standards. In the race to attract foreign investment, some governments may weaken regulations or ignore unsafe working conditions. This creates the so-called race to the bottom, where countries compete to offer the cheapest labor and the least strict rules. While such strategies may bring short-term economic growth, they often harm workers and reduce long-term sustainability. Many organizations and activists argue that globalization must include ethical principles such as fair wages, safe workplaces, and protection of workers' rights. At the same time, globalization can help improve labor standards by drawing international attention to abuses. When global consumers learn about poor conditions in factories abroad, they may push companies to change their practices. Social media campaigns, journalistic investigations, and international organizations often play a key role in exposing unfair treatment. As a result, some multinational corporations introduce stricter rules for their supply chains, requiring partners to follow ethical guidelines. However, progress is uneven, and the problem remains widespread. Another significant consequence of globalization is cultural hybridization. As cultures interact, they influence one another, creating new forms of art, entertainment, food, fashion, and language. For example, music genres mix styles from different continents, and many popular dishes around the world are a combination of various culinary traditions. Cultural hybridization can enrich societies and encourage creativity. However, critics argue that it may also weaken traditional identities and reduce diversity. When global brands dominate local markets, smaller cultural expressions sometimes disappear or lose their importance. Language is another area affected by globalization. English has become the dominant global language of business, science, technology, and entertainment. This makes communication easier and creates opportunities for people who master English well. However, it also puts pressure on smaller languages, which may lose speakers over time. Linguists warn that hundreds of languages are currently endangered, and globalization is one of the reasons. At the same time, globalization can help preserve languages by spreading awareness and supporting cultural exchange projects. The impact depends on how communities respond to global pressures. Globalization also has political consequences. Countries increasingly cooperate on issues like trade, security, migration, and climate change. International organizations such as the United Nations, the World Bank, or regional unions influence national policies. While this cooperation can lead to effective solutions, it can also cause tensions when national governments feel that their sovereignty is limited. Political debates about globalization often include questions about who should have the power to make decisions: national leaders, international institutions, or global corporations. In some regions, political movements have emerged that oppose aspects of globalization. They argue that global systems favor wealthy nations, weaken national industries, and create unfair competition. These movements sometimes demand stronger borders, fewer international agreements, and a return to local production. While some of these arguments reflect real concerns, others are based on fear or misinformation. The challenge for governments is to address citizens' worries without isolating themselves from the global community. Another important aspect of globalization is the accelerating exchange of scientific knowledge. Research is increasingly international, with scientists from different countries working together on large-scale projects. This cooperation speeds up discoveries in medicine, engineering, astronomy, climate science, and many other fields. For example, global collaboration helped develop vaccines quickly during the COVID-19 crisis. At the same time, globalization makes it easier for talented individuals to move between countries, which sometimes creates brain drain in developing nations that lose their skilled workers. The digital revolution is perhaps the most visible expression of globalization today. Online platforms connect people across continents instantly, creating global conversations on almost every topic. Digital globalization allows small businesses to reach international customers, freelancers to work with clients worldwide, and individuals to create content for global audiences. However, it also raises concerns about privacy, cybersecurity, data control, and digital inequality. Not everyone has the same access to technology, and countries with poor digital infrastructure may fall behind. The future of globalization will depend on how societies respond to these opportunities and challenges. Some experts predict that globalization will continue to expand, driven by technology and economic interdependence. Others believe that the world may move toward deglobalization, with countries increasing protectionism and focusing more on their internal needs. The reality will likely be somewhere in the middle. Globalization will not disappear, but it may become more regional, more selective, and more focused on quality rather than speed. One possible direction is sustainable globalization. This concept emphasizes balancing economic growth with environmental protection, fair labor standards, and cultural preservation. Sustainable globalization encourages countries and companies to think long-term and to consider the impact of their actions on people and the planet. For instance, consumers are increasingly demanding eco-friendly products, transparent supply chains, and ethical business practices. Governments, too, are adopting stricter environmental regulations and supporting renewable energy. Another direction is digital globalization too, based on artificial intelligence, automation, and advanced communication technologies. AI-powered translation tools reduce language barriers. Virtual reality and augmented reality allow people to work, study, or socialize across distances in new ways. Automation and robotics transform factories and workplaces, potentially reducing the importance of low-cost labor. These changes might reshape the global economy and create new winners and losers. Workers will need new skills, and education systems will need to adapt quickly. Social globalization is also expected to evolve. As young people grow up in a hyper-connected world, they develop global identities alongside national ones. They share similar interests, follow the same influencers, and participate in the same online cultures. This creates a generation that feels more connected to the world, but also struggles with issues like digital overload, mental health challenges, and the pressure to constantly compare themselves to others. One of the most difficult questions about globalization is how to reduce inequality. While globalization has lifted millions out of poverty, it has also increased the wealth gap within many countries. Managing these inequalities requires smart economic policies, investment in education, protection for vulnerable workers, and cooperation between nations. Countries will need to build social safety nets that help people adapt to global economic changes. Healthcare is another area where globalization shows both strengths and weaknesses. Diseases spread quickly across borders, but so do medical innovations and knowledge. Global cooperation is essential for preventing pandemics, improving vaccines, and providing access to medical technologies. However, inequalities in healthcare remain a major problem, with poorer countries often unable to afford advanced treatments. Globalization can help if it encourages more equitable distribution of medical resources. Food systems are also globalized, with products traveling thousands of kilometers before reaching consumers. This provides variety, but increases environmental impact and creates dependence on international supply chains. Some experts argue that future globalization should include stronger local production and food security initiatives. A balance between global distribution and local resilience may be necessary for sustainable development. In education, globalization opens doors to international degrees, online courses, and global exchanges. Students gain broader perspectives and valuable experience. But access to these opportunities is unequal. Wealthier students benefit the most, while others are left behind. Future educational globalization may require more inclusive programs and affordable opportunities for learners from diverse backgrounds. In conclusion, globalization is a complex and dynamic force that shapes almost every aspect of modern life. It has brought progress, innovation, and connection, but also inequality, vulnerability, and cultural tension. Understanding its consequences helps societies navigate the challenges and opportunities of an interconnected world. The future of globalization will depend on cooperation, fairness, sustainability, and the ability to adapt to rapid change. Whether globalization becomes a positive force largely depends on the choices we make today.